Good afternoon. If you stopping on this video, this is my testimony from one of God's strongest soldiers on how I know that God is real and, just what some of the things that he's done for me in my life and how I know that my God is real. Okay, first and foremost, I always knew that I was different. I never felt like I was from here. I am a star seed. When I was younger, I was a very, very depressed child. I always felt lonely. I was purposely excluded from a lot of things growing up, a lot of activities. I had a large family. I come from a large Jamaican family, so I had a lot of aunts and uncles, and it was as though they would just go out their way to exclude me. I did have one aunt that was my favorite aunt, and she would take me everywhere. But at the same time, she was low-key abusive and shit. You know what I'm saying? She used to pinch the fuck out of me whenever I said anything that she didn't like. And that's abuse, bitch, because I used to be bruised. But the rest of my family really kind of they used to fuck with me when I was little, if I wasn't isolated. And I remember the first time that, well, first of all, before that, I especially had one aunt who would go out her way, and I'm gonna say she's the first person that tried to break my self-esteem, and she started when I was a young child. She used to always taunt me, call me names. I was depressed as a child because I was very psychic, very gifted, and of course, I very empathic, so I didn't understand my gifts and stuff. I would dream things, I would say things. I'm a prophet. I have what Jamaicans call a goat mouth, so when I say something, it don't matter if it takes 2 days or 2 years, it's going to happen because I'm a seer. I see things, and I don't know if she was jealous of my gifts because I know gifts run my family, but I think I'm the only person who's actually vocal about their gifts. But she made my childhood growing up very hard. This aunt of mine, she was a bitch. I did beat her ass when I was 10, but that's a different story. But before that, she did her hardest to give me low self-esteem issues. I used to, eat my feelings. I was chunky. I wasn't fat, but I was very chunky, and I was very depressed. And so therefore, she would call me Miss Piggy. She would go out her way to, I had a lot of cousins. I grew up with a lot of cousins, and she would go out her way to go and get stuff for them and gather everybody around and have something for everybody except for me. She used to love to exclude me in my face. And, as I said, eventually I did whoop her ass when I was 10. She deserved it. But also too, as a child, I was very shy. I kept to myself. I've always been into the arts because, as I said, people always went out of their way to make me feel alienated as a child if I was not being molested by my mom's friends' kids and shit like that or whatever. So I was very depressed. So, I would write anything creative. I would draw. I would do my hair, anything creative. I just would pour into myself because I was my only friend. I had imaginary friends also too. And my imaginary friends really kept me company. Now I know that those are my spirit guides and stuff. But when I was younger, I was way more gifted. So I used to actually be able to see them. And it was just weird, So like I said, I was very depressed. And the first time I tried to kill myself, I think I was like 8, between 6 or 8, I don't recall. But I was just tired of being here on earth. I knew I wasn't from here. I wanted to go home. I didn't fit in with anybody. I didn't feel like I was really a part of the family that I was born into. So I tried to kill myself. I actually tried to strangle myself. And I tied a scarf around my neck. I was determined to. And I started fading, and that's the first time I heard God's voice. The voice said, no, it's not your time. And I was just like, why? And that's why when people say, you don't question God, I've been questioning God since I was a child because I needed answers, because if I didn't ask questions, I probably wouldn't be here to give my testimony. So basically, at that time, that's when I was told that I have a purpose, a large purpose. So I did not follow through with it. I never told anybody. I moved on. I just got more and more depressed, was more and more isolated. And it showed in some of my pictures. As a child, you could tell I was just a very depressed looking child. Really kept to myself. And as I said, you know, a lot of abuse happened to me as a child, but I never really said anything because my mom worked a lot. She was an entrepreneur, and she had a soon-to-be future husband that I absolutely did not like. I told her not to marry him, that she would regret it, but I guess she thought I was just a kid being a kid. But lo and behold, she did end up regretting that. And it just kind of was pointless for me to tell my mom anything growing up, because all she really did was just lie to me. She would make me false promises all the time about stuff and just carry on with the facade, the farce, the bullshit, you know. So I used to get molested a lot, and I never said anything. So then I was just so depressed that the next time that I tried to kill myself, I was 10 years old. And this time, again, in silence, I didn't say anything to anybody. I took a whole bottle of Tylenol, a whole fucking bottle, a whole bottle. There's a lot of pills in that bitch. I don't remember. It was not the small bottle. It was a big bottle. Like literally, like I took the whole bottle, and I sat there on the side of my bed, and God started speaking to me again. And I was just crying and stuff because, you know, I just didn't have the words. And God was speaking to me again, and he said, no, it's not your time. You have a purpose. You know, you have to be here, X, Y, and Z. And I would always get flashes of things, you know, that I would assume is my future, what I'm supposed to do. And I ended up falling asleep on the side of the bed, woke up next day, carried on with life. I was still there. And that was the last time that I tried to kill myself, when I was 10 years old. Because at that point, because I had heard God speaking to me that time too, but I was like, fuck that. I already took the damn pills and shit. I knew if I took that whole bottle of Tylenol and I was still here, I knew I was supposed to be here. So I said, okay, Lord, I'm not going to try to kill myself anymore. So I never tried to commit suicide again after that. However, that did not mean that life got easier. I grew up in the church, and nobody in my family would listen to me or take me seriously whenever I would tell them my dreams, because I have prophetic dreams and stuff. And, you know, nobody really paid me no attention. But as I said, I grew up in the church, so I would go and I would tell my pastor at the time about my dreams and everything. And he was a prophet also. And he was the only person that would listen to my dreams and give it a little bit of time. It would come true. And, you know, sometimes when you dream stuff, it doesn't happen just straight out. You'll kind of dream like in parables. So you have to pay attention to things and clues and everything like that. So he would help me to translate and understand my dreams. And sure enough, within time, it would happen. And I'll never forget, around that time, around that age, between 10 and 12 is when, I don't know if people remember, they started having those bracelets, those WWJD bracelets. I'll never forget the What Would Jesus Do bracelets. I had like 3 of them on my wrist, because that was what helped me to keep my mind in the right place. I was so depressed, and whenever people would do things to hurt me, I would just think, what would Jesus do? Because like I said, my brother used to beat the shit out of me. Okay, but that's why I got these motherfucking hands today. So thank you, Craig. But I was very lonely. I was very depressed. So I would just always think, what would Jesus do? And I for some reason, people have always wanted to publicly humiliate me for as long as I can recall. And God just always protected me through those situations also too. So in school, the first school I went to, you know, a girl wanted to beat my ass in front of everybody. God protected me just through a lot of things. Through a lot of times people wanted to try to go out of their way to publicly humiliate me, and God always brought me up out of that situation. And as I got older, I moved to Georgia, started high school, and it was just like a whole different life cycle that I went through. And I just had a hard time, I don't know. I just always had a hard time with females, right? Which is why you should never judge a book by its cover. Females never liked me. So they would start rumors about me and stuff. Now, everybody knew me. I would say I was a floater. I always had a rested bitch face, but I always was fly. I always used to put that shit on, you know. And honestly, even when I was in high school, God protected me because anytime I told my mom that I needed money for anything, she couldn't do it because either she had to help my older brother or my younger sister. So she always told me no, so I had to be very independent. And therefore, I used to steal clothes from Rainbow to have clothes to wear at the school sometimes. And God definitely protected me because as I used to be there shoplifting, there'd be people getting busted, boom, boom, left and right around me. I know that was God. I'm sorry, Rainbow. But I ended up getting pregnant when I was 16. I was not trying to get pregnant. You know, I wasn't that fluent in sex and stuff like that. So I really didn't know when I got, he lied to me. But during that time, that was a hard time for me in my life. And I had to just pray through it all because he did get me pregnant and he did abandon me. Okay. And then after I had my daughter, you know, he came back and his father told him to tell me that he does not want to be with me. And he did. His father said, tell her you don't want to be with her, or I'm going to disown you. And he did. And lo and behold, that broke my heart. Just think of it, 17 years old, a new mom. So really, by that time, I just had decided that God was just the father figure in my life and everything. But it was hard for me to try to recover from that. And honestly, it took me a quarter of a century to really recover from all of the damage that was done. That's another story. But it definitely took God, had to point out a lot of things to me because that kind of had sent me into like a little delusion of always wanting something that I ended up never having. And it really took for God to point out to me like, hey, is this what you really want for yourself? You know, because I didn't have the love of my father, because I really did not have the love of my mother. She never, growing up, she never told me that she loved me unless I told her I loved her. Never. So, you know, I would always have to pray. I would always have to pray to God because I just didn't feel loved. And, you know, when you don't feel loved, you go looking for love in wrong places, of course. And I did that for a little bit. But, you know, I had a lot of sexual assaults. I have 8 sexual assault stories, but 7 of them took place in my late teens to, you know, early 20s. So just imagine going through all of that trauma during those times. And whenever things like that would happen, I would pray and ask God, like, well, why me? Why me, Lord? And God has always spoke to me. So he was like, God to me, some people call God a woman, source, divine, whatever you want to call God. I chose to identify God as a male figure to take place of the male figure that was absent in my life, because I did have a stepfather, and my stepfather used to go out of his way to pitch my younger sister against me. You know, everybody has always been petty with me. He would buy things and say, I can't use it, I can't have any, you know, from like juice, just dumb shit. So, you know, people have always gone out their way to make me feel ostracized for some reason, or to publicly humiliate me and embarrass me for some reason. I don't know why, because I've never been a mean person, and I've always been the kind of person, I've always been a fighter, but if I'm fighting, somebody did something to me. Somebody did something to me, you know? However, yeah, so I chose to have God as my father figure, you know, God, our Father who art in heaven. And so I was just like, I bet. I decided that instead of having daddy issues, God was my father. So, and then also too, I also could not help but to notice that the females that were around me that did have their father figures in their life, they were more fucked up than I was in the head and shit, you know? They were settling for all types of abusive and toxic relationships. So I figured I was better off. I said, hey, you can't miss something you never had. God is my father, bet. Kept moving forward and stuff. as I said, through almost